In our last episode, we covered the first part of our series on beholders. In that episode, we covered the beholder stat block, how beholders first came to be, their religious beliefs, how their mind functions, and what it would take for a beholder to be able to coexist with human beings in a traditional civilization. If you haven't seen that video, then I highly recommend you go and watch that one first. But now for this one, we're going to be delving deeper into the beholder's biology. We're going to be spending the entire video literally just breaking down how this monster works, how their eyes produce magic, how they levitate, how their cardiovascular system functions, how they smell, how they taste, everything and anything relating to the function of their body. So this is going to be a great video. However, before we begin, this video is brought to you by Grimhollow Transformed. If you're a fan of dark fantasy in Dungeons & Dragons, then you must have heard of Grimhollow, a campaign setting for grim adventures in a godless world. When it comes to dark fantasy, there's just no one that does it better than Grimhollow. And well, they are remaking their old books for the revised 2024 version of 5th edition with both updated, improved, and entirely new content. The Player's Guide to Grimhollow includes the Monster Hunter class, 40 Dark Fantasy subclasses for the traditional 5e classes, and what has been my all-time Grimhollow favorite, transformations. In Grimhollow, you can transform into werewolves, vampires, liches, and more, with procedural stages where you slowly become more and more like a monster, gaining features and abilities as you descend into your change. This is by far the coolest way to deal with this, I think, where you get powerful feats, but then lose a little bit of yourself in the process. The campaign guide for Grimhollow takes you into the world of Etheris, with expansive lore to help you detail this dark fantasy world, with guidance on how to make gritty games with choices that matter, variant rules to help reinforce that setting, special curses and diseases that fit the themes of the setting, and of course, many magical items designed to fit in such a grim world. Oh, and for those of you who play exclusively online, they got full VTT conversion on all of your favorite platforms, such as Roll20, Foundry, D&D Beyond, and more. For me, The Player's Guide to Grimhollow was one of my favorite old-school Kickstarter books for 5e, and I am extremely excited to see how they have updated the concept. If you like dark fantasy like I do, Grimhollow has always been the way to go, so please click the link in the description and sign up to be notified for Grimhollow Transformed. Their Kickstarter goes live on the 1st of October, so don't take my word for it, just sign up to be notified and then see it for yourself when it goes live on the 1st. But now, on to the video. Okay, so this is the body of a beholder. Now, of course, it looks like an alien monster from another dimension, but you would be surprised to know that we actually know exactly how all of this works, and we're going to cover each and every single biological facet of this creature to the deepest extent possible. Are you ready? Because I sure as hell am. Now, the skin of a beholder is as hard as steel. Now, if you've seen the AC that beholders have on the monster manual, then I'm sure that you already know that to be true. But the reason that that is the case is because the skin of a beholder is also its skull. Technically speaking, beholders are considered to be endoskeletal creatures, meaning that they have skeletons inside of their bodies. However, beholders are weird in that it is hard to tell where the skin ends and where the bone begins. They're basically just one and the same. It is like a special type of flesh-colored bone. It is very porous, meaning that it has very small, tiny holes scattered through it. Tiny holes in which little tiny air ducts carry air in and out of the beholder. And that is effectively how the creature actually breathes. Now, the bone itself is extraordinarily light and, as we already covered, very, very hardy. Unfortunately, however, it is a pain for those who hunt beholders to be able to use that bone for crafting armors or weapons, as the bone loses much of its durability after the beholder dies. In fact, I shouldn't even be calling it a bone, because technically it's not even bone. It is just some strange alien material that behaves somewhat similar to it. Again, this creature is an aberration from probably another dimension, so even though it appears like flesh, it is actually just some kind of bone-like thing that is very inflexible and is very light. That material, however, is not the same one as the one that covers the eye stalks of the creature. The eye stalks are meant to be more flexible and they're not quite as hard, and you can actually cut them. unlike the rest of its body. Now, the eyes of a beholder, which I am sure that you're all looking forward to hearing about, are weird and very peculiar. As you very well know, the eyes of a beholder are not just used for seeing things, but also to produce rays of magical energy, which the beholder uses to either attack or for their everyday living. Though you will be surprised to know, as always, that beholders also use their eyes to absorb magical energy. And oh yeah, but we'll get to that later. This is how the beholder's eye actually looks like, as you can see here. All of their eyes look like this, the big eye and also all of the small eye stalks. Now, first of all, the eye of a beholder is hard, okay? It is not squishy like a human's eye. The eye of a beholder is hard as stone. The iris of a beholder is made of hundreds of tiny interlocking sheaths of crystals, each of which can be independently moved. This precise control over the iris is what allows the beholder to basically shape it in whatever shape it wants. It could make its iris be a square, a circle. It could even retract it into the eyelids so that you couldn't be able to see them at all. And it is also, as it happens to be, what allows it to decide how much light it allows into the eye or how much light it allows out of the eye, of course, in the sense of the magical rays that it uses. Now further, the beholder doesn't even have like one single lens on its eye like a human would. Instead, they can have as much as a dozen different lenses, and again, each of which can be independently moved. The amount of lenses is what allows the beholder to basically have the exceptional vision that it possesses. It is said that a beholder can count the legs of a mosquito from 120 feet of distance, which is absolutely insane. The interior of the eye is a jumbled mess of interconnected and transparent strands of nervous tissue. This nervous tissue is called avocularies, and every single eye has that strand of tissue, but braided in a different way. Some might have it sort of taut and straight shaped, others might have it formed into like a spiral form, and others might have like a corkscrew-like pattern. And the thing is, this is actually what defines what kind of magical ray or magical effect the eye is going to make. It is in fact the type of design that the avocularies take that focuses the magic into the specific form that the eye uses. And this is why the beholders cannot actually change what magic each of their eyes does. Whatever shape these like nervous strands have from the moment that they're born, that's basically what they're stuck with for the rest of their lives. Now, the retinas on the back of the eye are then connected to the brain of the beholder, and they are the ones that transmit the magic from the brain into the eye. Oh, and yes, the brain of the beholder is in fact the organ that holds the magic of the creature. But yeah, basically just how the eye collects light and then sends those images over to the brain to be interpreted, that same connection is also used to funnel magic from the outside world into the brain. And then that magic gets sent back into the eye to then be used as a magical, powerful ray. But yeah, the beholder can basically just absorb magic into its body by literally just looking at the magic, and it can do this to virtually any kind of magic, from spell scrolls to magic from a spell that it is seeing being cast. It can do so from a magical item or literally just any other kind of magic. Now, the amount that it absorbs is very, very small. It's never going to be enough to actually like dispel or manipulate or harm the magic that it is seeing. A beholder would basically have to stare at a spell scroll for over 3 months or so before the spell scroll would be damaged by having all of its magic be absorbed. So it is not actually a problem, and it's definitely not something that is used or can be used in combat. But yeah, provided that the beholder is constantly studying or interacting with magic in any way, shape, or form, that is actually how the creature refuels its magical capabilities so that then it can do its magical rays later on. Now, we don't actually have any information as to how the brain exactly functions, such as that, how to explain how they're able to hold all this magic, but this is also an aberration. We know, of course, of mind flayers and creatures like that are very well known to be able to use the power of their brain for magic, so this is really not that uncommon. But now let's go inside of the beholder. Let's go deeper into the biology. We're just getting started, guys, okay? It's gonna get crazy. The beholder's internal organs are all relatively flat. Basically, they're like bladders that expand when filled but are normally very, very flat. This allows the creature to fit so much into its body that just normally wouldn't fit. And of course, that is kind of necessary. Consider that, when you consider that the mouth and the main central eye of the beholder are basically like almost half of the creature's body, you need to figure out ways to just cram all the organs in there. In fact, beholders are so dense that they weigh over 4,000 to 5,000 pounds, and that is on top of their bodies already being naturally buoyant, which we will cover later, but just know that they can float. And in spite of the fact that they're floaty creatures, they weigh so much, which says a lot. Beholders are omnivores, meaning that they can eat both meat and plant matter. However, interestingly enough, beholders don't really have a sense of taste. In fact, most of the senses that beholders have are all atrophied. Their sense of touch is virtually non-existent. You can touch a beholder's skin, and they might not even notice. Of course, it's kind of bone, so it makes sense in that way. But it also makes sense because when you consider the fact that they float all the time, they're basically never touching anything. And also, they have eyes all over their body, which allows them to see anything that might be touching them. In other words, they don't need a sense of touch because they have a great sense of eyesight, so they will always know if something is around them. And a very similar thing happens to their sense of taste, actually. Not every creature is able to see itself eat from so many angles like a beholder can, and does. Their enjoyment of food, in fact, comes literally from just seeing themselves eat, and from the texture of that which they are eating, rather than the flavor itself. This is most likely also an evolutionary mechanism that allows them to basically just eat whatever they want because they don't have to taste it. So if they're struggling living in a cave, it doesn't matter what they eat. They can just do it. So then when it comes to eating, beholders prefer two things. One, interesting textures. They like weird combinations of crunch and soft. They like things to pop in their mouth. The more interesting, basically, the better. And two, they like colors because, again, they like seeing themselves eat. So if a food is bright or has interesting colors, they're gonna love it. Interestingly though, the only flavor that beholders appear to still be able to detect very strongly is that of alcohol, of all things. This is why beholders enjoy wine, because it is one of the few things that they can taste that can have a myriad of different flavors. Now, speaking of senses, their sense of smell is also somewhat atrophied. Beholders don't have nostrils. Instead, they have those tiny ducts on their skin that we talked about before. It is through those ducts where they breathe, so that's also where they smell. And the thing is, they have hundreds and hundreds of them, just like scattered all throughout their skin, meaning that they're not particularly designed and they're not potent enough to be good at detecting scents from them. According to the lore, only their sense of hearing is basically on equal terms to that of a human, which again, basically uses the same little holes found all throughout the skin. Now, one exception that I will mention is that apparently the tongue of a beholder, since it can function as a hand for many of these creatures, it is basically the only part of their body with any real kind of sense of touch. So sometimes a beholder might lick or grab something with their tongue if they want to feel it, which again doubles back to why they focus so much on the texture of food, because that's the only way that they can actually feel textures with their tongues. And many beholders have prehensile tongues, which allows them to be able to grab things with the tongue. So again, it's literally like their arm. Now, anything that a beholder eats is sent down to their first stomach. This is basically just a large, shallow bag where the object is bathed in acid that liquefies it. Then it is sent to the second stomach so that the liquid can be prepared for digestion. It usually takes about 30 minutes to an hour for food to be fully liquefied. And then once the food is liquefied, it is actually sent to the one single lung of the creature. Yes, it is sent to the lung. The lung will push air into the food liquid to form it into a pink frothy substance, which is then spread out all across the body through very small arteries. Now, the beholder doesn't actually have a heart. Like I said, basically every organ in his body is flat, so instead, most of everything that happens inside of the body of the beholder is done through a diaphragm, which expands and contracts, and through those contractions, the lung also expands and contracts, and through the air and pressure that the lungs produce, things like blood and nutrients get to move throughout the body. Similarly, the beholder has a blood sac that fills with blood and then cleans it before sending it back to the rest of the body, so no heart whatsoever. Anyways, once the nutrients of the meal have been used, the waste liquid actually flows all the way back to the mouth where it is discarded. How is the waste liquid discarded, you say? Well, nothing fancy actually, it just kind of falls off the mouth while the beholder is doing its thing. Now, let me say that again less tactfully in case you missed it. The beholder shits from its mouth. Now, let me say that more tactfully and with more context. The beholder defecates by drooling. Every single time that you've seen a picture, okay, of a beholder drooling, either on the official Dungeons & Dragons book or even as part of this video, you're welcome. You've been watching a beholder relieve themselves. Yes. So now, canonically speaking, we're not given a specific description of how the drool actually looks, but it is described as drool, and it is described as foul-smelling, so take whatever you wish from that. But yeah, basically, the same thing happens if the beholder eats something that is not edible for whatever reason. Such a thing would come back to its mouth, and then the beholder would vomit it, because there is no other way out. Now, you'll be surprised to learn how exactly a beholder flies, and you'll be even more surprised to learn that it is in fact not a magical effect. In fact, the lore is very explicit about this, and even states that no amount of dispelling or even an anti-magic zone would stop a beholder from flying. The body of a beholder produces a fascinating gas called teucium. Not sure how to pronounce that. It is lighter than air, and it is stored basically everywhere within the beholder's body. Every organ that they have possesses this gas in some form or variety, and the skeletal mass of their cranium is riddled with tubes, inside of which are also designed to hold this gas. So basically, and to keep this simple, the beholder can regulate how much of this gas is active within its body, such that it can lower its amount in order to descend, or increase it in order to ascend. All of this happens automatically by the beholder, just simply thinking about it, and to them, this would come as naturally as it would be for us to breathe. Now, this gas only allows the beholder to go up and down, so you can actually think of this like filling a balloon with helium. In order to actually maneuver, the beholder uses its lungs to send air out into the holes of its skin, which function like little thrusters, which allows it to turn and move in a particular direction. This is actually why beholders are notorious for being so slow when flying, as you probably noticed when you saw the stat block of the creature, as they only have 20 feet of movement, of flying movement. But this is also why you cannot stop a beholder from floating even if you knock them unconscious, though killing the beholder does causes the body to stop producing the gas, which of course makes it so that the creature would eventually then fall down into the ground. Interestingly enough, though, the lore does state that teucium is so ingrained in almost all parts of the beholder's body that if you were to take out an organ from a dead beholder and just throw it into the air, you would actually see the organ either levitate in place or simply fall very slowly again, like a buoyant balloon. It takes about 12 hours for the body of a beholder to completely lose all of its buoyancy, or more if the dead beholder is targeted with a gentle repose spell, which of course lengthens the decomposition period of the corpse and allows the gas to remain in the body for longer. How are you guys doing so far? You all good? Okay, because we got more. Reproduction. Oh boy. Alright, so there are two types of beholder reproduction. There is the biological reproduction, and then there's the aberratic reproduction. The biological way for beholders to reproduce is usually never seen because it only happens once in a beholder's life, and when it does happen, the usually xenophobic creature becomes even more xenophobic and basically hides until it is all over. Whereas the aberratic way for them to reproduce can theoretically happen any day, and it is far more likely for another creature to be able to witness it. So, let's just start with the common variation. Okay, so beholders are aberrations. An aberration basically means that the creature is alien. In other words, the way the creature functions falls beyond what nature should or would be able to produce. Some of these creatures come from other dimensions. They can create magic simply from their mind, and sometimes they can break the laws of physics, change reality, or have properties that just simply cannot be explained. That applies perfectly to this bizarre way by which beholders can reproduce. Okay, here we go. The brain of the beholder has the seeming ability to be able to conjure things into existence. Where these conjurations come from, or how exactly they're produced, is not exactly told to us, but a beholder can, and does, every once in a while, summon a creature into thin air. Generally speaking, it does this by dreaming. When a beholder sleeps, even though its body is in a dormant state, its mind is still perfectly active. And when the beholder dreams, the beholder can somewhat manipulate the dream, like how a lucid dreamer might be able to understand and interact with its own dreams. And so, when the beholder dreams of a creature, sometimes that creature is just simply manifested into reality, and just appears near the beholder in the real world. Now, this is already weird, but the weirder part is that the creature that is created doesn't even have to be a beholder. In fact, the beholder could, in theory, summon goblins or humans or even a Tarrasque if it just dreams of it just so. And the even weirder part is that this ability to manifest reality does not even have to be limited to a different creature. In fact, the beholder can dream of themselves, and through the dream, unironically and literally, change themselves. In other words, a beholder could dream themselves into looking different, into obtaining limbs that they previously did not have, or obtain organs that they did not possess. Now, how all of this works? Well, like I said, we don't really know. It's not like there's science to this. However, there are some limitations that we do know. Ed Greenwood himself has graciously commented on a few of those. Specifically, it appears that for the beholder to be able to change or create something, they must have a perfect understanding of that thing, including its internal biology. This is why most beholders usually just create other beholders whenever they dream, because they know themselves and they know how they function, so it's just simply easier for them to create that. If a beholder understood well the inner workings of a human, then that beholder could then produce humans through the dreams. But this is also why many of the creations that beholders produce through their dreams are usually an amalgamation of the properties of different creatures all put together, because that is always going to be one of the easiest ways for anybody to create something entirely new. For example, if you wanted to create a monster, probably one of the first things and easiest things that you would do is just grab an existing monster and just give it the features of another monster. We've all done that. You might grab a human and just give it claws for hands, maybe give it a head and a tail of a lobster and just call it good. I mean, that is not too uncommon for beholders to do, actually, which is why you see so many different variations of beholders, in fact, some which just look like beholders, but they have tiny different changes, such as having claws for limbs or having scales rather than skin. But anyways, it is usually difficult for a beholder to be able to create something that looks exactly like they do through these dreams, which inevitably means that the beholder that is created looks different to them, and we know what happens when that happens. When two beholders who look very different meet, they basically kill each other. But yeah, so that is the bizarre, aberratic way that they reproduce. But you might be shocked to know that beholders actually do have a more normal way to reproduce, even though it is not really that normal, and it is in fact still very much alien. So much so, in fact, that they don't even need a partner to reproduce. And of course they don't, because ultimately such a xenophobic creature that despises and wants to kill anything that doesn't look like they do would have a really hard time reproducing if it needed a partner in the first place. Okay, so the beholder's reproductive organs are actually found deep under the tongue, and in fact, the tongue can unhinge itself, and similar to how some animals can unhinge their jaws, in order to grant extra space for those reproductive organs during reproduction. Okay, so beholders have no males or females. They are able to reproduce asexually just by themselves, and the way the lore explains it, it appears almost as if the beholder itself has no choice in the matter. This is just something that happens to them only once in their lives, and usually within their first 40 years of life. The strange organ below their tongue grows large and swollen during this period, and the beholder becomes even more erratic and even more paranoid. As the organ grows, it becomes the womb, inside of which begins to grow the babies. The gestation period lasts about 6 months, during which the beholder eats about 4 times their usual fill, storing the food in reserves inside of its body, in its stomach, intestines, and even inside of its lung. I mean, anywhere that the creature could physically hold food, it does. Even if it has to cram food in its lungs, it'll do it. By the last 2 months, the womb has swollen so large and so much food has been stored inside of the creature that the beholder is physically incapable of swallowing anything else. And in fact, even the tongue itself cannot fit anymore in the mouth and just protrudes awkwardly, just like bleh, from the body. Quote, "The birthing of new beholders is a sight that few have witnessed, and by all accounts, it's something that even fewer would want to witness. When a brood comes to term, a beholder's jaw unhinges, and it regurgitates its womb out through the mouth. The creature bites the womb off, and it floats gently in the air. The young beholders are forced to chew their way out of the gory mass to freedom. They are capable of flight immediately, but their eye powers develop later in life. Although a beholder gives birth to up to a dozen young at once, only a handful survive. The parent observes its young and decides which look most like itself. The others are eaten by the ravenous parent along with the discarded womb, and the surviving young are forced from the parent's lair within the hour to fend for themselves." End quote. Beholders generally live for up to 100 years, but can sometimes make it all the way to 120 or so. After they pass their first century, they begin to gradually lose their powers up until the moment that they fully die. Baby beholders have what you call strong racial memories, meaning that they know a lot about what their parents knew, which does allow them to be active and survive from the very moment that they're born. Quote, "Within minutes of emerging from the womb, it can speak the beholder's language and already displays powerful xenophobic and intolerant attitudes. For these reasons, it is difficult for a beholder to become anything but evil." End quote. The one thing baby beholders cannot do when they are born is use their eye rays. Those they develop as they absorb magic through their eyes for the next 3 or so months, of course, provided that they have access to magical items, otherwise it will take longer. However, they do grow relatively quickly, maturing basically as soon as they turn just 2 years of age. And once they have that initial growth spurt, their growth then slows down all the way until they grow frail after their first century. Whew, there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. Always appreciate to have you all here, enjoying all this awesome lore here with me. As always, I super appreciate you guys leaving comments, liking the video, and telling me what else you wish to see. We will get one more video on beholders, I believe, covering their cities and all of the different variations of beholders that there are. But after that, I'm curious about what you all want to see. So please go ahead and leave me those comments down below if you can. We will be making a vampire video next, and then hopefully after that I'll be doing the last beholder video, just so you guys are aware of the schedule here. But yeah, please check out my website, mrrex.store, where I have tons of really useful PDFs that you can purchase to enhance your Dungeons & Dragons experience. We got What They Don't Tell You About Magic Items, which is a great list of magical items that you or your players can purchase, with each item having an actual price that you know of and you can see. Not like in the Dungeon Master's Guide where you don't know what everything costs. And of course, it's all balanced such that the magic items are actually affordable in a traditional D&D campaign, so it's not like to buy a simple +1 armor, you're gonna have to spend 30,000 gold pieces, even though you would never be able to collect that much money on a traditional game. We also have monster classes, entire classes based off and designed as monsters so that you can play, as a dragon or a treant, or as an ogre, as a traditional class, with features from level 1 to level 20, and we even have subclasses for most of them. We in fact have beholders as one of the options that you can be. For the beholders, we have several different magical rays that you can pick and choose from, really fun roleplay focused features that I'm personally very happy with, and of course several tables to help you create your beholder characters, such as what quirks make your beholder different from others, and what fuels your paranoia, which is my favorite. There's some great stuff in there, so please go ahead and check it out. That is mrrex.store. Anything you buy there directly supports the channel. So yeah, once again, one last time, thank you all very much. Also, make sure to check out Grim Hollow on the link in the description. Don't forget, and I will see you